Hello. No hiking today, but we are on a little side trip at the Alvin C. State Historic Park. And there's going to be a tour starting here. I think that's his house over there. Starting in just a little bit, so we're going to check that out. And check out some of the other stuff out here. Alvin C. I think he was the most decorated soldier in World War I, it was. Anyways, this is his birthplace, and this is where he came back to live after the war. This is his house. This is his property. So, just a little video to check it out. We're heading over to the visitor center now and check it out. Be back. Inside the store. Yeah, I guess that's what he looked like. World War I artifacts. You want a moon pie, Cheyenne?
Here's the leaking of the 303 field.
So there's like his unit. Don't know where he'd be in that picture. Alvin C. Home, National Historic Landmark. Sort of. So this is his housey. Tour starts here about 10 minutes. And that's his mill over there. The grist mill. We'll go check that out after the tour thing.
And he's got a mailbox over there.
Yeah. Be back.
We sent over 4.5 million men overseas to fight this great war. Now, out of those 4.5 million, 122 of them received the Medal of Honor, one being Sergeant York. Now, in this depiction, you see he's wearing two medals. He's wearing the Croix de Claire, which is like a French version of the Medal of Honor, and of course the Medal of Honor itself. Now, have y'all seen the Sergeant York movie by chance? Yeah, most of you. It's a good movie. I love that movie. It is one of those things though. It is a Hollywood production, so it's not 100% accurate, but I do like to say it's got more right than it's got wrong. So it's if you want to get a good little brief explanation of Alvin's life, it's a perfect movie to watch. Like at the beginning of the movie where Alvin's a drinker. He's drinking, fighting, he's just up to no good. This is actually a true portion of that movie too, where all his kids are always asking, well, Papa, were you really that bad? He goes, well, I was worse. So he wasn't scared to talk about it. He wanted to show you that he's a human being and he's made mistakes in his life. And then 1915 rolls around, and that's when he gets saved. That's when he accepts that faith into his soul. Now, in the movie, you see him get struck by lightning at this moment. That's where he wakes up afterwards and the singing church next to him. This is actually one of those portions where that's actually not true. He didn't actually get struck by lightning in real life. But like he always would say stuff like, well, when the faith hit my soul, I feel like I got struck by lightning and had to lead a life of faith from then on out. So Hollywood here and it's just kind of juiced it up for the movie purposes. But still doesn't take away too much from the story. You still see him get saved. And from then on out, Alvin does a really good job of changing his life. He becomes a very faithful Christian, and he does a good job of not cussing, drinking, and getting those bar fights he's been getting into. So he really switches his life around. Now, a couple years later, America gets involved in this great war. And after that, the draft comes in, and that's when Alvin gets drafted into. It was actually in 1917. Now, he does try to apply for the conscientious objector status, meaning he doesn't want to fight due to his faith. Now, he was denied this status, and for a couple of reasons. For one, Christ of the Christian Union was the church he was a part of at the time, wasn't very well known. There was only really 3 of those churches in America in total, so it wasn't very well known distinction of Christianity. And 2, he had a small arrest record. He was arrested a few times for fighting in bars. So for those reasons, he got denied the conscientious objector status. So he had to go to Camp Gordon in Georgia, and he had to get trained up for basic training to go overseas. Now in the movie, you'll see he debates with the superior officers. They talk about Bible verses, U.S. history, really try to get to the root of why Alvin didn't want to fight. See if he was a genuine Christian. See if he didn't want to kill anybody or be in the army due to his faith. And they come to that conclusion of, you know what, he's genuine. We need to give him an opportunity to go home. So they give him a deal. We'll send you home for 10 days, and we'll give you a U.S. history book, a war history book. We want you to study and pray, because Alvin also always had his Bible on him. So he comes home. And if you remember in the movie where he hikes that mountain, and he's up there with his hound dog, and he stays up there for a couple days, that's another true moment. And you can actually see the location where he was at. If you look to the right corner of the barn and look straight up, there's a little, right before you get to the peak of the mountain, you'll see the little plateau up there. That's called Yellow Doors. It's on Black House Mountain. He stayed up there for 3 days. He fasted, he prayed, and he studied. And that's where he came up with the decision, I'm going to fight for my God and my country. And that was that real snapping moment for Alvin. That's where that real change of heart really happened. And that's where he made that decision to fight. Now he goes overseas, and he's in the 82nd Division, and in his platoon he has about 20 men, and they go over the top on October 8th, and they're going to go take Hill 223. Now, they were supposed to get artillery support on this day that actually never came. And that was actually something that happened quite often in World War I, when someone got a missed order, or some people messed up and forgot to use artillery. But what happened there, they never got it. So when they went over no man's land, they lost 3 people in their platoon, and they were getting hounded. People were getting sniped, and heavy machine guns, and of course, the Germans had their own artillery as well. So what they decided to do is they flanked left to try to get behind enemy lines, and they were very successful on this. So the 17 remaining platoon that Alvin had, they get behind German lines, and the first people they actually see are 2 German medics. And instead of killing them, they actually shot in the air and they start hooting and hollering, trying to make themselves sound really big to make these guys run back to their camp. And they actually lead them right back to their German camp, and they actually, at this moment, they're still shooting and hollering, and the Germans actually gave up quite easily. So they actually had 40 prisoners at the beginning. And that's, and that's a huge task in itself. So right now we have 17 doughboys with 40 German prisoners on gunpoint. Now this is the saddest portion of this story, because at this moment there's 3 hornet's nests, German machine guns up the ridge that notice that their men are being taken prisoner. And they yell out in German, "Get down." So all these Germans drop, and there's 17 doughboys just out in the open. And unfortunately about half of his platoon gets cut down at this moment. And this is actually the moment Alvin becomes Sergeant York, because he's now the highest, he's the only living officer there, and now he's the highest ranking one, so he has to take charge of the platoon. Now he instructs the 7 remaining men that he has to watch the prisoners while he goes up the ridge to take out those machine guns. Now I like to say this is the only portion that Alvin did single-handedly. He did take out 3 machine guns by himself. which that's still that's pretty awesome, and that's another reason why this story blew up so quickly. But from then, they would go from point to point, to trench to hill, and they took 132 German prisoners, 7 guys, 8 including Alvin. This was insane. This is nothing short of a miracle. And from one reason I always like to state was he took prisoners. He chose to save their lives, not take them. And I don't know about you guys, but if I just watched half my men get cut down like that, I don't know if I want to take prisoners. But Alvin didn't hesitate. He knew he wants to save lives, not kill them. And he talks about in his diary how he did have 25 confirmed kills in World War I, which he talks about how if he didn't kill them, they would have killed him. And he was a soldier, he had to do his duty, and that was just part of the job. Now, from this moment, that this story blows up. And I like to repeat myself one more time on the aspect that he did not do all this by himself. He was not a one-man army. He was no Superman. He had help, and that's why he wants to give credit to the men that were there with him that day. But after the war, he comes home, and there's that another moment where I like to say that wasn't true is at the end of the movie, where that pretty bow moment where it was Miss Gracie, who becomes Alvin's wife, surprises him with his built home and happy-go-lucky, and all ends well. Technically, they didn't move into this home until 3 years after the war, so that portion is technically not true. So when they came back home, he did have access to the property, just not the home yet. So when he came home, he actually had to move into the home cabin right across the river here, which is the Wolf River. And he actually got married a couple weeks later, and they did have their firstborn son in that cabin as well, Alvin Jr., which is the only born York child outside this home, which is pretty cool to think about. But we'll go ahead inside in just a moment, and I'll point out some of the outskirt buildings here for you guys. For example, across the street here, we got the blacksmith house. And that's where Alvin would work all the iron to make horseshoes, nails, tools, and pretty much anything he would need for this farm, he would have made right in that little blacksmith house right there. Then we got the visitor center across the street where y'all got your tickets. Now that's where they would sell stuff like salt, pepper, sugar. They would have their newspaper of the week, and any canned goods that anybody needed, they would have there in the York General store. And then across this little parking lot, we got the corn crib. Now that's where they would store all the corn before they take it over to the grist mill, which is across the Centennial Bridge. And that's where they would actually grind it up to be cornmeal, and that'd be the product they'd actually sell for the common public. And we got the big old barn. Now, that's where they would store all the hay. Technically that did burn down twice. Now, it was one of those things where back then they didn't have treatments like we do today, so it'd be a lot easier to get dry and combust, and that's why it did burn down twice. Now, it is still technically original, because Alvin did have it rebuilt all 3 times, but it's kind of cool to think about that. Now, we also have 2 stone buildings. We got one here and one towards the home. Now, this one was mostly for storage. Alvin would have all his plows, his tills, the forks, pretty much all the farm equipment that he would have for the land. It would be stored right in there. Now, Alvin himself was part of the CCC, the FFA, and construction crews that helped build the highway. He helped build train tracks over Black House Mountain. So, through these organizations where he truly figured out how to use stone for buildings. Now, this one over here actually had someone had me cracking up last weekend because we called it Miss Gracie She Shed. And I'm like, that's perfect, because that's exactly what it is. It's actually her canning house. That's where she would can all the fruits and vegetables that we'd have here on the farm. And then the right door is actually the smokehouse. That's where they would hang and cure all the meats for the winter time. Now, these 3 little red buildings here, the first one's actually the chicken coop. That's where they'd hold and store all the hens for all the eggs they would have. And one hen can lay 1 egg a day, so they would have a few dozen in there. And the second one actually is the generator house. So this was the first home in this valley to have electricity. So they actually had to use that home to have a diesel generator. They didn't actually have power lines at the time. So they had to use that for a diesel generator house. Now the last one with the 2 white windows is actually the kids' playhouse. Because Alvin himself was a huge outdoorsman. He loved to hunt, he loved to fish, he loved to hike. He was a farmer pretty much his entire life. That's just who he was. So he wanted to give his kids a nice safe space outside to enjoy their outdoors. Now, I know I'm saying a lot out right now, and if y'all don't hesitate to stop me and ask any questions you have for me. Over here at the painting, just kind of wrap up the war talk. Because this is another depiction of Alvin in the Meuse-Argonne Offensive, and that was actually the biggest offensive that the United States was a part of in this Great War. Now, you'll see he's being charged by 6 Germans with bayonets. Now, if you remember in the movie, he had this depicted as well. And if you remember, he talked a little bit about turkey hunting, and how when you have a group of turkeys, you're going to want to start from the back to the front. give you more opportunity to get more than just one. And that's what he does here. You see he's got 2 guys going down already, 3 guys shot, and 1 guy charging like he's still got support. And he does all this with his M1911, which is a huge task. Because he was a huge marksman too. He was very accurate with every weapon he used. Now if you remember, in the movie he stole a German Ruger off a soldier. Now the reason they did that for movie purposes is because they didn't actually have an M1911 that could house blanks. So for filming they actually had to use a German Ruger. Which doesn't take away from the story all that much, but still cool to see him actually do that on film. Now I do like to say too that this painting is not original to the home. He would not have something in his house like this. He didn't talk about the war all that often. Like even to the point where when he came home, his mom, his Miss Gracie, who became his wife, his brothers and sisters, they didn't even know he had the Medal of Honor. He didn't tell them. The only reason they figured it out was because of the newspapers. They read it in the newspaper before he even mentioned it. And I don't know about you guys, but the first person I'm calling is Mom. I was like, Mom, I got the Medal of Honor, but not Mr. York. He didn't talk about it. And when he came back in 1919, the first city and state he came to was New York, New York. And he had movie stars, they had college professors, he had Cordell Hull, the longest reigning senator of Tennessee, come and ask him to talk about the war. And they offered him money and war bonds and so on and so on. And he said no to it all. He said, Uncle Sam's uniform is not for sale. And I'm like, that's one of my favorite quotes from Alvin. He's like, Uncle Sam's uniform is not for sale. He didn't want to make money off the bloodshed of this war. And that's just who he was. That's why, I'll stop talking a little bit about the war and get to this beautiful home we're standing in and get to the legacy that Alvin truly wanted to be remembered for. And that's water and electricity and, the most of all, education. Stuff that he brought to this valley. Now, this beautiful home we're standing in, I love the theme of it. It's come on in. Doesn't matter who you are, where you're coming from, how poor you were. Oh, you got holes in your pants? We'll get that fixed for you. You're tired? We got a bed upstairs ready for you. That's just what this house is all about. It's full of love, faith, and good people. And that's why I love working here. You're going to be able to tell people about this beautiful home. Now, they would have anywhere from 20 to 100 people in their house at one time. So they were full of visitors all the time. And originally, this room was actually a screen room. So Miss Gracie would have her clothing lines on the ceiling for any of the clothes that need to dry out. And then every time it got a little too cold, they'd bring all the flowers in here so they didn't get frosted over too bad. And then eventually, they do put the windows in that you see today. They kind of use this as a storage facility. They'd have extra beds in the corner, chairs in the center, and standing cupboards in the right just to have pillows, blankets, and sheets for whatever their guests really needed. So anytime they had a full house, they kick all their kids into one room and bring extra beds and stuff upstairs for their guests. Now, I do like that we still have Alvin's certificates here. We have the Croix de Claire and the French, that's the French version of the Medal of Honor, and then of course we have the Medal of Honor itself. And I do love the picture of Alvin and Miss Gracie in the center there too, just because you'll notice he's got a big old hand. He was a big guy. He was 6'3", 190 pounds when he went into the military. And I don't know if y'all noticed this, but the little statue that we were next to in the beginning, that statue is exactly 6'3" inches tall. So it's as tall as Alvin, which is pretty cool.
Where are the medals now?
They're in the State Museum in Nashville, the Tennessee State Museum, and they're just a little too high ranking just to have sitting in the house all the time.
Yeah. Acquainted with Lindbergh?
All right. So the story to that. So Charles Lindbergh and Alvin would actually debate pretty heavily of America's involvement in World War II. And Alvin he wanted to get involved. He said America has paid rent once, World War I, rent due again. We have to get back in because Germany's getting to power. We need to do something to stop them. Charles, on the other hand, didn't really think America had a good enough excuse to be in this war. So they would debate. They would hit college campuses, they would hit newspapers, and they'd have radio stations sometimes, and they would debate pretty heavily, to the point where they started getting annoyed with each other. So Alvin decided to put a picture of his little bathroom and say, "Crap on you," and I'm right. I was like, a little jab from the sergeant, why not? But I do like to say they do respect each other on the aspect of they're both military men. So it was more of a joke than anything. But good question and good eye. Now, there is another little scary story to this room. There's not a scary story to every room, I promise, but it's actually behind you. So if you look at this door, there's a little sliver that came out right here. Does anybody have a guess what maybe happened there? Bullet. You guys are getting right on it. They usually have some misfires before this, but it was a bullet. So, this was a southern home. There was a gun in pretty much every room. I'm going to close this door and I'll show you where the bullet came from. If you look at the center right here, you can see it.
Yeah.
So he had a 6-shooter revolver in here, and one of his grandsons got in there and was actually playing with it, thinking it was empty, and yeah, it was not. He actually shot it through this door and hit the front. Shot at the glass, and it was pretty scary, if you can imagine. Now, the scariest part of this story is that he had 2 granddaughters playing in the foyer, and his wife was coming in from the highway.
Oh, wow.
So this easily could have been a whole lot worse. But luckily, no one got hurt again. But Alvin fixed the glass, but left the damage in this door and that door to have a story. So 1, this is never going to happen in my household again. And 2, he wants to give you a life story. Just like his drinking. He could easily try to stuff that under the rug for the movie, but he chose to tell you the truth and show you exactly. And try to give you like something that you can learn from his mistakes. And that's just who Alvin was. But any questions? Yeah.
Take it, that's an original set of encyclopedias down there.
He has encyclopedias. He has law books, English and history books. He has a big old dictionary in here. He did a really good job to get his hands on some books.
Congressional papers. That's interesting.
Very much so.
And this is all, they didn't add on to the house or anything. This is the size it was from.
This was the size it was. The only thing that technically the Yorks added on was this door right here that goes into the kitchen.
Okay.
Miss Gracie was sick of having to go all the way from her study and all the way back around to go down.
Yeah.
So he put it in the door for his wifey. Now this is where Alvin did all his studying. And again, he hired himself that tutor. He got those books. He did a really good job in educating himself. Because before the war, if you see something he wrote before, it was illegible. I know the word chicken scratch is a very common phrase, but it was. You can't read a thing he's writing. And then after the war, however, a couple years of tutoring under his belt, you can see that he does a really good job on improving his penmanship. He does a really good job on actually adding and attempting grammar. And he drastically improves himself. And he even teaches himself how to use a typewriter. Now that's a huge task, especially for a man who was 32. And he wrote most of his speeches on there. He wrote letters to Cornell and some presidents. And a lot of people have been affected just from that one piece of machinery right there. Which is pretty cool. Now, I do love all the paintings and pictures in here too, because the first one here is the Wolf River Methodist Church. That's the church he was saved at. That's the church he was married across from, and now he's even buried there today. So it's a huge, impactful place for him. And it's actually still standing there today. Y'all definitely need to go check that one out. And then we got Alvin in full uniform. Now, I love this picture because this is actually pretty rare to have. Alvin didn't put the uniform on all that much after the war. So to have a picture of him in full uniform is pretty unique. With the exception of one thing, he said Uncle Sam's boots were the best boots he's ever had, so he wore those quite often. And then we got Miss Gracie holding one of her youngest daughters, which I believe is Mary Ellen. And I think the coolest thing about this painting, or picture, is that we still have her shoes right here. It's like,
oh sweet,
isn't that so cool? It's like such tiny little feet. And then we got Mary and William York here. That's actually Alvin's mom and dad. Now, Alvin's dad did pass away in 1911. He actually got kicked in the chest while he was shooting a mule, and he died from lung complications. And there are some connections in why Alvin started drinking after this moment. You know, he got a little sad, and he was a stressful life because he was 23 at the time, and he had to take over a family of 8. Which I'm 23 now. I don't think I could ever actually take over a family of 8 without being a little stressed out. Now, I think the most honorable thing about Alvin is even when he was drinking and fighting and getting up to no good, he still took care of his family. He made sure there was food on the table, that the farm was still being planted and harvested, and that his kid brothers and sisters were still taken care of, which is pretty amazing to me. And then we got the Williams up here. That's actually Miss Gracie's mom and dad. And then we got a picture of her whole family here, which she's the little girl in the bottom right corner there with the long pigtails on. And like I said before, like, her family didn't have the most money to get clothes, so she accessorized her hair. You know, which is just something I think is quite funny.
Is that like original stationery in there?
We got stationery. We got his original typewriter, and we got a couple of his viewfinders here. Now I love the viewfinders because I got a Scooby-Doo one at home that you can cha-ching, cha-ching. But those were the original ones where you got to replace the picture and everything. Like I said, that bathroom was put in 1945, and it's kind of funny because Miss Gracie had a sister that stayed here with them, and she was very old school, so she would say stuff like, "I don't do what I do outside, inside." So even when she had the bathroom, she still chose to use the house. Which I always thought that was hilarious. And now this bedroom here is the most accurate to 1922. It still has the shiplap walls and ceilings. Because originally all the rooms would have looked like that.
Yeah, and the 3/4 bed.
And the 3/4, yes ma'am.
Boy, he's so tall though, I can't imagine that. You know, it seems like people were smaller then, because those beds are...
Absolutely. Well, he actually stayed in a twin bed downstairs, and him and his wife had separate beds.
Oh,
Yes,
really?
ma'am. And then, apparently that was more normal back then.
Yeah.
Today I'm like, that's a little odd, but... And they kind of use these rooms as like family apartments for a good while until their families would get a little too big and they move into the little white houses. Oh yeah, and they have. Like, I know this is the biggest guest room they have. They don't have 8 or 9 beds just in this room alone because it's a little longer. But every room would have 4
How
or 5
could they
guests.
afford like to cook for everybody or do?
Well, Alvin would have many different businesses. But there was a fact of that he did not make much money because of the fact that he always had guests, and he was very charitable. Like for his gristmill, if someone come in with corn but they couldn't afford to get it ground up, they're like, you know what? Give me a ham for Christmas. You know what? It's on us to come help me with the farm a little bit. That's just who they were.
Is the certificate original?
No, I don't know which certificate you're talking about, sir. I don't know if it's original. I don't want to say yes to that, but I would see. I want to see why I would.
It doesn't be too short for me. I would hang over it.
Just little scraps of anything. You know how they never wasted anything
Oh, they didn't
back
waste a
then?
thing,
Yeah,
right?
so they could reuse the tiny scraps and use them for that. That's pretty neat.
That is his whole original.
These aren't prices, these are some of the different
I've never even noticed
props. There's a couple of price tag things in the house.
Maybe they're dated. I think it was maybe
Yeah, there's like crutches in the
October
corner there.
1st or something. I'm gonna take a picture of that and ask about that.
There's another thing upstairs.
Those fragments,
They get a
$5
$5 mark on it.
Those crutches in the corner.
Now, something that Alvin and Miss Gracie did do a lot was antique.
Okay.
So that might be original tags. I don't know if they would take them off though. That was something they did a lot together when Alvin was home. That was their little activity. Now, they would have to eat in shifts since they had so many people in the home. So they'd eat 3 breakfasts, 3 lunches, and 3 dinners pretty much every single day. Just so they could get everyone fed in the home.
Why is that, Alex?
So this actually would have a pipe that would go right into, they had a, right into the fireplace. It would actually go up so it smoke would stay in. Now technically this is not the original stove. This is a replica. Hers was actually double the size. And you can still see like the foothold where it was. Because she would have 12 eyes instead of just the 6.
So she had the stove from the beginning. She never had to cook on a fire.
Now when they first had the home, they did have like a little rotisserie fire setup,
Okay.
which I thought that was pretty cool too. But I love how you can still see like the scorch marks on the ground where she had the stove and fire. Now, that's what I always talk about. They did offer us the original one, but it's like in a barn about 100 yards that way.
Really?
Yes, ma'am. The only issue was it was in a barn, so it was a little rusty and some of the doors were falling off. And if we would have moved it, yeah, and we just didn't want to damage it more than we would have done good. So we just got a replica of what something very similar should have had. Now the pie safe over here. This is where they would store all the fruits and vegetables and any of the hot pies and even the bread would be stored on the second shelf, and then the open cans would be on the bottom. And of course you got her fold-out ironing board that was here. And they have the iron on the stove pretty much all the time, so anytime they needed to press out some clothes, they would have the opportunity to do so. Now, since Miss Gracie was home alone sometimes, she was always thinking about home safety and security. And correct me on this fact if I'm wrong. I can't remember. I know it was in the 30s, but I'm going to guess 1936 is when Charles Lindbergh's kids, one of his sons, was abducted. It was either 36, 38. I know it was late 30s. But this terrified Miss Gracie because Charles is a very famous man, and so was Alvin. So she would always think outside the box for some home security and safety ideas. And what she did was she would shove knives into the door. Now, this would make it really hard to open up that door.
Yeah.
Exactly. And even if you were successful getting inside, the knife would fall to the ground and make such a loud clatter to where it would wake everybody up and
Smart.
get you. Yeah, I thought she was a very genius woman in it herself.
Use what you have.
Use what you got. And it was back then they didn't have the best locking systems. And then I love the Hoosier cabinet too. There's something called a flower cabinet. Like the flower will go up top on the left here and it'll funnel down into a hand crank sifter.
Oh, sweet.
Oh, and that's the coolest thing. And that's manpower right there. And then she had a biscuit making section right here where she made a lot of cornbread and biscuits. And apparently she was like the breakfast queen. So if at a time machine, we'll go back to get some breakfast from Miss Grace.
That's original?
This is original, yes sir. People love the Hoosier cabinet. People, because I know my and Papa have one of them, and a lot of people love to go to antique stores for it. Now I love this room too, because this is where everyone will come together and pray and sing before they eat some good food. And I love pointing out the dinner bell outside, just because apparently it didn't matter where you were, if you could hear that dinner bell, you're welcome to come get some grub. I'll be running every day. I know that time to get some more food.
Yeah.
And everything you do see in here is original. And that's the German tea set I was telling you all about that Mary Ellen's husband sent to her.
Oh, wow.
And I love this room. They imagine all this stuff being in use. Now there is something in here that doesn't match.
Oh, you're a gar? Is that a gar?
That is a gar. You actually beat me to my question. That's exactly what I was going to talk about. Is the long-nosed gar up there, a mouthful of teeth, just ugly fish. Now I think I was telling this lady here that they did a lot of antiquing together. That's something they did, and that was like their fun activity. And like when Alvin was home, let's go shopping, let's go find us something cool to take home. And one day they were antiquing, and Miss Gracie sees that, and she goes, "Oh my gosh, that's the most ugly thing I've ever seen in my life. That's scary looking."
So she bought it.
And no, when Alvin being the good husband he was, he purchased it for her, put it in her dining room. That's a little job to give her massage. That's perfect.
Good sense of humor.
And I don't know if it's like a husband's role to do that, because my dad at home has a singing bass that'll scare the heck out of you every time you come in the house. And my mom hates that thing too, so I think it's just the contract, I think, is what it is. Now behind me is gotta be my favorite picture of Alvin right here. I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
He's just like happy and he's smiling.
Kind of blowing
And he's got his cowboy hat on, dipping it, and I don't know. There's just something about it. You can just see the good soul in him and how kind he was. I think the cool thing about this picture too is that hat he's dipping is actually on his hospital bed.
Oh, they had,
But yeah, we'll check it out right quick.
How long was he on that hospital bed?
Now he was on this hospital bed from 54 to 64 when he passed away, so about 10 years.
Here's a picture. Is this the picture on it?
Yes, ma'am. And that is actually a cake for the, I think it was the 49th anniversary.
Yeah,
of the
42nd anniversary.
42nd of the Musar battle. And I always looked at that cake and I'm like, that looks like a delicious cake. I got like one little slice of that.
So why did he need it?
So in 1949, he started having episodes, which we now found out were strokes. And the first time it happened to him, he was still moving around okay. He could still get himself from his bed to the wheelchair. And he was, moving around by himself. Then 1954 rolls around, he has a massive stroke, which actually paralyzes the left side of his body. Now, he can't no longer get himself from his bed to the wheelchair. His sons actually have to pick him up to get him to the wheelchair, which I don't think anybody would be going to be picked up. Now, this was happening for a couple years, and then the American Legions, which is a military organization that helps veterans with medical, medicines, surgeries, anything they really need to help them out. And they noticed that Alvin's bedridden. They're like, no, this man's done too much for his country, too much for education. We need to do something for him. And they buy him this Sterling hospital bed. Now this thing's fully electric. It's the only one here from here to Nashville. It can stand him straight up to get blood flow back to his legs. It can bend his waist so he can eat food more efficiently. It just drastically improves his life, and it really, really helps his health a little bit too.
What year is that from then?
Now he got it, I believe, in 1959.
And how old was he when it all started?
His first one was 49.
He's 49.
And he died at 76 and 64, so he was roughly 56, 57 years old
when he had that massive stroke.
when he had the massive stroke.
Okay, my camera died, so I'm on my phone. We are checking out a replica of a World War I trench, so you can get an idea of what it was like to fight in trench warfare during the First World War. Does not sound like it was a fun time. guess they would have some gunners here. Empty pockets before going out. I'm not sure why they would do that. So they would actually have barracks in here. Huh? That's where you could climb out. Yeah, they would live in these. And how they would advance, they would come tumble out of the trench and move on to the next trench. No, they didn't. I don't think they used these in any of the other. Ugh. So I wonder how long they had to stay in each trench before they could move on. What is the typical amount of time that the soldiers had to spend in these things? Trench life at night was often far worse than during the day. Bombardments made it impossible to sleep in the open, and men often lacked proper shelter. Soldiers often woke to rats chewing on their uniforms. Not very fun, man. Okay, be back. Alvin C or grist mill. Grist mill. This is where they would bring the corn to be ground. And apparently they used the river and the paddle wheel, which doesn't look like it's there anymore. So they would let the water through right there, which would turn the mill, which we'll go up and see. where it would get ground up. And I guess we go into that box there. I'm not sure. Corn and meal elevator. Not exactly sure what all that does. Meal sifter. Corn cleaner. No clue how any of this would work. Okay. Okay, so I'm under the mill now. And I guess I'm gonna assume that's the wheel that would turn. They would let the water through here. Water would come. See that lock that is the opening. See what I can open it. Come rushing through here. Turn this. Head back out down the river. And I'll turn the mill up there. And show all the grinding. I'm not sure what that is. Okay, the only store in this town. Whoops. I'm in the wrong gear. Alvin York's grandson runs this place. Come on. So, we're gonna go and check it out. Okay, this is the Wolf River United Methodist Church, established in 1840. It is listed as a historical landmark, and apparently this is the church that Sergeant York was married in, and I would assume he attended here as well. Buildings, actually, this building, 1888. So, being that it was a Methodist church, and this was the church he attended, that explains a lot of the character that Mr. York was. Because in my experience with those in the Methodist church, they were very giving, very accepting people, and very conscious of the actual teachings of Jesus. And of all the denominations that I've experienced, they seem to follow it the closest, Jesus' actual teachings. Not a big fan of other denominations, but Methodist, yes. Be back. Okay. So we are at the actual final resting place of Alvin C. York. Yeah, careful. Here's some of his children. Here's Thomas Jefferson York. Remember he was talking about that? And there he is. Alvin C. York. And his faithful wife. Some of the other York family members right there, and then there's some more back over there. Great American hero. Congressional Medal of Honor, established Alvin C. York Institute, which is in Jamestown. And I think they said his son, this one here, was killed in the line of duty. Apparently he was a police officer.
What did he say?
The guy giving the tour mentioned it. Okay, I think that's all there is to this. We are heading back to the car. Hope it wasn't too boring. And we'll see you all out on the trail. Oh yeah, keep your stick on the ice.